The shadows across Sofia Clarkson's pale face as she stared at the appointment cancellation notice in her trembling hands. 26 years old, and she'd already learned that cancer doesn't discriminate by age. But what she was about to discover would cut deeper than any diagnosis. Sometimes the people closest to you can inflict wounds that no chemotherapy can heal. Treatment postponed due to insurance verification delays, the notice read. Sofia's heart sank as she realized this meant another week of uncertainty, another week of the aggressive lymphoma spreading unchecked through her body. But the real betrayal was yet to come, waiting for her in the form of 3 simple words from the people she trusted most. Take an Uber. This is the story of how Sofia Clarkson learned that strength doesn't always come from where you expect it, and sometimes the most profound healing happens not in hospital rooms, but in the quiet moments when you finally understand your own worth.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sofia Clarkson had always been the responsible one. At 26, she worked as a junior marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm in downtown Portland, Oregon, living in a cozy apartment she shared with her college roommate, Emma Rodriguez. Her days followed a comfortable routine. Morning coffee at the kitchen counter while scrolling through campaign analytics, the 15-minute walk to the office through tree-lined streets, and evenings spent either working on freelance design projects or video calling her parents back in Sacramento. The Clarkson family had always been tight-knit, or so Sofia believed. Her older brother Marcus, 31, worked in tech sales and lived just across town in his sleek Pearl District condo with his girlfriend of 3 years, Jessica Walsh. Her parents, Robert and Linda Clarkson, had moved to Portland 5 years ago to be closer to their children after Robert's early retirement from his accounting firm. They'd settled into a beautiful craftsman house in the Hawthorne district, complete with the garden Linda had always dreamed of, and the home office where Robert now managed their investments. Sunday dinners at her parents' house were sacred. Every week, the family would gather around Linda's antique dining table, sharing stories over her famous pot roast and discussing everything from Marcus's latest client victories to Sofia's creative campaigns. These dinners painted the picture of an ideal American family, successful, supportive, and unwaveringly connected. Sofia's relationship with her family had always been built on mutual reliability. When her parents needed help setting up their new smart TV, Sofia spent her Saturday afternoon patiently explaining streaming services. When Marcus was swamped with a major presentation, Sofia designed his PowerPoint slides free of charge, working late into the night to perfect every transition. When her parents decided to renovate their kitchen, Sofia took vacation days to coordinate with contractors and pick out fixtures. In return, her family had always been there for her smaller crises. They had helped her move apartments twice, celebrated every promotion with elaborate dinners out, and provided a safety net of emotional support through the usual challenges of young adulthood: difficult bosses, failed relationships, and the general anxiety of building a career in a competitive field. Sofia's life in Portland represented everything she'd worked toward since graduating from Oregon State University 4 years earlier. She'd built a small but meaningful social circle, including her roommate Emma, her work friend David Kim, and a handful of college friends who'd also stayed in the Pacific Northwest. Her studio apartment in the Sellwood neighborhood was modest but reflected her personality, filled with plants she'd somehow managed to keep alive, vintage furniture she'd restored herself, and walls covered with her own photography and design work. She'd even started dating again after a difficult breakup the previous year. Jake Morrison, a graphic designer she'd met at a networking event, had been texting her regularly for the past month. Their relationship was still in its early stages, coffee dates and long conversations about design philosophy, but Sofia felt hopeful about where it might lead. Her work at Peterson and Associates Marketing was demanding but fulfilling. Sofia had joined the company straight out of college and slowly worked her way up from intern to junior coordinator. Her boss, Patricia Stevens, had been mentoring her toward a potential promotion to senior coordinator, which would mean a significant salary increase and the opportunity to lead her own campaigns. Sofia had been putting in extra hours, staying late to perfect client presentations, and volunteer for additional projects. The routine of Sofia's life provided comfort and stability. Tuesday yoga classes with Emma, Thursday evening walks along the Willamette River, Saturday morning visits to the farmer's market, where she'd buy flowers for their small dining table and ingredients for whatever new recipe she'd found on Pinterest. Her biggest concerns were typical for someone her age: saving money for a down payment on a condo, wondering if she should switch careers to freelance design full-time, and navigating the complexities of modern dating.
Sofia prided herself on being low-maintenance and independent. She'd inherited her father's practical nature and her mother's creative spirit, creating a balanced approach to life that seemed to work well. She rarely asked for help, preferring to solve problems on her own. But she also knew her family would be there if she truly needed them. This knowledge formed the foundation of her security and confidence. Her apartment reflected this independence. Every piece of furniture had a story. The coffee table she'd found at an estate sale and refinished, the bookshelf she'd built herself from a YouTube tutorial, the gallery wall of photographs she'd taken during weekend trips around Oregon. Sofia had created a life that felt authentically hers, supported by the knowledge that her family's love and support were always just a phone call away. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd moved to Portland partly to be closer to her family, turning down job offers in Seattle and San Francisco. She wanted to build her career while maintaining those important family connections, believing that having her parents and brother nearby would provide both emotional support and practical help when needed. The Sunday dinners, the impromptu coffee dates with her mom, the occasional help with household projects, these interactions reinforced her belief that she'd made the right choice. Sofia's health had always been something she took for granted. She was young, active, and generally careful about eating well and exercising regularly. Her last physical exam had been routine, with her doctor praising her excellent blood pressure and encouraging her to keep up whatever she was doing. The most serious medical situation she'd faced was getting her wisdom teeth removed in college, an event that had prompted her mother to drive up from Sacramento to take care of her for a week. This foundation of family support, professional growth, and independence created the backdrop against which Sofia's world was about to dramatically shift. She lived with the quiet confidence that comes from being 26, healthy, and surrounded by people who love you. Her biggest worries were whether to splurge on the expensive coffee beans at the farmer's market and if Jake would ask her to be his +1 to his company holiday party. In just a few weeks, this carefully constructed life would begin to unravel in ways Sofia never could have imagined, revealing truths about the people she trusted most that would force her to rebuild everything she thought she knew about family, loyalty, and her own strength. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in early October. Sofia woke up feeling like she'd been hit by a truck, her body aching in ways she'd never experienced. She attributed it to the stress of the Henderson campaign launch she'd been working on for weeks, combined with the changing Portland weather. A hot shower and extra coffee would fix it, she reasoned. But the fatigue didn't lift. By Thursday, Sofia found herself struggling to climb the 2 flights of stairs to her apartment, stopping halfway to catch her breath. Emma noticed her roommate's pale complexion over their usual morning coffee ritual. "You look like you haven't slept in days," Emma observed, studying Sofia's face with concern. "Maybe you should take a sick day."
Sofia dismissed the suggestion with a wave of her hand. It's just the campaign crunch. Petition needs the Henderson presentation by Friday, and I'm not about to let her down right before my performance review. The weekend brought no relief. Sofia spent Saturday in bed, telling herself she just needed to catch up on rest. But when she woke up Sunday morning with swollen lymph nodes in her neck that felt like golf balls under her skin, a chill of real fear ran through her body. She canceled Sunday dinner for the first time in months, texting her mom that she was coming down with something and didn't want to get everyone sick. Linda responded with her usual maternal concern, offering to bring over chicken soup and medicine. Sofia declined, insisting she just needed rest. By Monday morning, Sofia couldn't ignore the symptoms any longer. The lymph nodes had grown larger, and she developed a persistent cough that left her breathless. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Dark circles under her eyes, skin with a grayish pallor, and a general appearance of someone far sicker than she wanted to admit. The urgent care clinic was busy that morning, filled with the usual mix of Portland residents dealing with seasonal ailments. Sofia sat in the waiting room, scrolling through work emails on her phone and trying to convince herself this was just a bad flu. She'd get some antibiotics, take a few days off, and be back to normal by the weekend. Dr. Rachel Chen was thorough in her examination, her expression growing more serious as she felt the enlarged lymph nodes in Sofia's neck, armpits, and abdomen. She ordered blood work immediately, and Sofia found herself in the lab within an hour, watching vials of her blood disappear into testing machines. "I want you to see an oncologist," Dr. Chen said when the results came back that afternoon. The word hit Sofia like a physical blow. "I want you to see an oncologist." Cancer doctor. The word seemed impossible to connect to her 26-year-old life. She called in sick to work for the rest of the week, something she never done before, and drove home in a daze. The appointment with Dr. Michael Harrison at Oregon Health and Science University was scheduled for the following Tuesday, the longest 6 days of Sofia's life. She told no one about the referral, not even Emma, instead retreating into herself and researching lymphoma statistics until her laptop screen blurred with tears. Dr. Harrison was kind but direct. After examining Sofia and reviewing her blood work, he explained that they needed to perform a lymph node biopsy to confirm the diagnosis. The procedure was scheduled for the following week, and Sofia signed consent forms with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. It was only then, sitting alone in her car in the OHSU parking garage, that she finally called her mother. "Honey, what's wrong?" Linda's voice immediately shifted to alarm when she heard Sofia's tears through the phone. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I've been sick, and the doctors think it might be lymphoma." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity before Linda's sharp intake of breath. "Oh my God, Sofia! Why didn't you tell us sooner? Your father and I are coming over right now." Within an hour, Robert and Linda Clarkson were sitting on Sofia's small couch, their faces etched with worry and confusion. Marcus arrived shortly after, leaving work early for the first time Sofia could remember. The family that had always gathered for celebration was now united by fear. "The biopsy is next Wednesday," Sofia explained, her voice hoarse from crying. "Dr. Harrison says we'll have definitive answers within a few days after that." Linda immediately shifted into protective mother mode, discussing which specialists they should consult and whether Sofia should get a second opinion. Robert, typically more reserved, sat quietly processing the information, occasionally asking practical questions about insurance coverage and treatment options. Marcus surprised Sofia with his emotional response. Her usually composed older brother pulled her into a fierce hug, his voice thick with emotion. "Whatever this is, we're going to fight it together," he said. "You're not doing this alone." The biopsy procedure was more invasive than Sofia had expected. Dr. Harrison removed an entire lymph node from her neck under local anesthesia, explaining that they needed enough tissue for comprehensive testing. Sofia's parents waited in the surgical suite, Linda pacing the small room while Robert sat rigid in his chair, both of them looking older than Sofia had ever seen them. The 48 hours waiting for results were surreal. Sophia took medical leave from Peterson and Associates, a conversation with Patricia that left her feeling like she was talking about someone else's life. Emma moved between treating Sophia normally and hovering with worried concern, clearly unsure how to behave around her suddenly fragile roommate. Jake called several times, confused by Sophia's sudden unavailability and cryptic explanations about family stuff. Sophia found herself unable to explain her situation to someone she'd only been dating for a few weeks, so she let his calls go to voicemail, adding relationship anxiety to her growing pile of worries. The call came on a Friday afternoon while Sophia was attempting to work on a freelance design project, hoping to distract herself from the constant knot of anxiety in her stomach. Dr. Harrison's voice was gentle but clear. "Sophia, I need you to come in Monday morning. We have your results, and we need to discuss your treatment plan." Treatment plan. The words confirmed what Sophia had been trying not to accept. She had cancer. That evening, the Clarkson family gathered again in Sophia's small living room. This time, the conversation was different, more serious, more frightened, but also more determined. They discussed logistics. Sophia would need to take extended medical leave, possibly move back in with her parents during treatment, and prepare for months of chemotherapy. "Whatever you need," Robert said firmly. "We'll figure out the financial stuff. Your health is the only thing that matters right now." Linda was already making lists: which hospitals had the best oncology programs, what Sophia's insurance would and wouldn't cover, and how to organize a support system for the months ahead. Marcus offered to research clinical trials and connect Sophia with a friend whose wife had survived breast cancer 2 years earlier. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sophia felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't facing this alone. Her family was rallying around her with the same efficiency and love they brought to every challenge. Sunday dinners might be replaced by chemotherapy sessions, but the Clarkson family would adapt and emerge stronger. Sophia went to bed that night feeling scared, but not hopeless. Cancer was terrifying, but she had something many patients didn't: a support system that would move mountains to help her heal. She fell asleep planning how she'd organize her treatment schedule around her family's availability, never imagining that her most fundamental assumptions about their loyalty were about to be shattered. Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray Portland drizzle that seemed to match Sophia's mood perfectly. She sat in Dr. Harrison's office with her parents flanking her on either side, all three of them staring at the oncologist as he delivered the news with clinical precision. "The biopsy confirms diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, stage 3, Dr. Harrison explained, pointing to images on his computer screen that looked like abstract art to Sophia. "The good news is that this type of lymphoma responds well to treatment. With aggressive chemotherapy, we're looking at a cure rate of approximately 85% for someone your age." 85% sounded promising until Sophia realized it meant there was a 15% chance she might die. At 26, those odds felt surreal and terrifying in equal measure. "We need to start treatment immediately," Dr. Harrison continued. "I'm recommending R-CHOP chemotherapy. That's a combination of 5 different drugs administered intravenously every 3 weeks for 6 cycles. The entire treatment will take approximately 5 months. Linda was frantically taking notes on her phone while Robert asked detailed questions about side effects, success rates, and alternative treatment options. Sophia found herself oddly detached from the conversation, as if they were discussing someone else's medical crisis. The treatment schedule Dr. Harrison outlined was intensive and inflexible. Chemotherapy sessions would occur every 21 days, lasting 6 to 8 hours each time. Sophia would need to be at the infusion center by 7 in the morning, and the side effects would likely leave her exhausted for several days after each treatment. "You'll need someone to drive you to and from each session," Dr. Harrison emphasized. "The anti-nausea medications can cause drowsiness, and some patients experience what we call chemobrain, temporary cognitive fogginess that makes driving unsafe." Transportation seemed like the least of Sophia's worries at that moment, but she dutifully nodded along with her parents' assurances that driving wouldn't be a problem. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of pre-treatment appointments, insurance authorizations, and medical preparations. Sofia had to undergo a series of baseline tests, heart function, lung capacity, kidney function, to ensure her body could handle the aggressive chemotherapy regimen. Each appointment reinforced the reality of what lay ahead. Her first chemotherapy session was scheduled for a Tuesday in early November. The night before, Sofia barely slept, alternating between reading online testimonials from lymphoma survivors and staring at the ceiling of her bedroom. Emma had offered to stay home from work to provide moral support, but Sofia declined, not wanting to disrupt her roommate's life any more than necessary. At 6:30 Tuesday morning, Sofia's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Ready when you are, sweetheart. Dad's making coffee for the road." The drive to OHSU was quiet, filled with nervous energy, and the kind of small talk families make when they're trying to avoid discussing the elephant in the room. Linda had packed a small bag with snacks, magazines, and a soft blanket, anticipating that Sofia might need comfort items during the long infusion process. The Hemsworth Cancer Center was busier than Sofia had expected, filled with patients of all ages, connected to IV poles and seated in reclining chairs arranged around the large open treatment room. Nurses moved efficiently between patients, checking vitals and adjusting medication drips with practiced competence. Sofia's assigned chair was by a window overlooking the city, and she found herself grateful for the view as Nurse Janet Martinez began the process of accessing her newly installed port, a small device surgically placed under her collarbone to make repeated IV access easier. "First time?" asked Janet, with a warm smile noting Sofia's obvious nervousness. "Hopefully not too many more times," Sofia replied, attempting humor while watching the clear tubing fill with the first of her medications. The initial drugs were pre-medications designed to prevent allergy reactions and nausea. Sofia felt surprisingly normal as they entered her system, chatting quietly with her parents and even managing to eat the sandwich her mother had packed. It wasn't until the actual chemotherapy drugs began flowing that the reality of treatment hit her. Some patients feel the effects immediately. Others don't notice anything until later, Janet explained as she hung the bright red bag containing the doxorubicin, one of the most potent drugs in Sofia's treatment cocktail. Everyone's body responds differently. Sofia fell into the latter category. The first day of treatment passed uneventfully, with her parents taking turns reading aloud from magazines and Sofia dozing intermittently in her chair. By 5 o'clock that evening, she felt tired, but not dramatically different from any other exhausting day. "That wasn't so bad," she told Emma when they returned home, feeling cautiously optimistic about the months ahead. The crash came 48 hours later. Sofia woke up Thursday morning feeling like she'd been poisoned, which, in a very real sense, she had been. Every muscle in her body ached, her mouth felt like sandpaper, and waves of nausea rolled through her stomach despite the anti-nausea medications she'd been prescribed. Emma found her on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m, too weak to make it back to bed after vomiting. Without hesitation, her roommate helped Sofia to the couch and spent the rest of the night monitoring her symptoms, offering sips of water and cool washcloths for her fevered forehead. "I think I need to call my mom," Sofia whispered around dawn, recognizing that this level of sickness was beyond what she could manage alone. Linda arrived within an hour, taking one look at Sofia's gray complexion and immediately shifting into nurse mode. She'd researched chemotherapy side effects extensively and came armed with electrolyte solutions, bland foods, and a detailed schedule for Sofia's medications. "Honey, you're moving home with us," Linda declared, surveying the small apartment and its single bathroom. "At least until you're feeling stronger. You need someone with you around the clock." Sofia wanted to protest, to maintain her independence, but she lacked the energy to argue. The idea of her childhood bedroom with its attached bathroom and her mother's constant care suddenly seemed like a sanctuary rather than a step backward. The move back to her parents' Hawthorne house happened gradually over the following week. Marcus helped transport Sofia's essential belongings, setting up a comfortable space in her old room, complete with a new humidifier and blackout curtains to help with the light sensitivity that accompanied her treatment. Robert, meanwhile, had been researching cancer support resources with his characteristic thoroughness. He'd identified local support groups, meal delivery services, and even a house cleaning company that specialized in maintaining sterile environments for cancer patients. "We're going to approach this like any other project," he told Sofia as he presented her with a color-coded binder containing her treatment schedule, medication lists, and insurance documentation. "Organization and preparation are key to success." Sofia's second chemotherapy session 3 weeks later followed a similar pattern. Relatively easy treatment day, followed by several days of debilitating side effects. This time, however, she was surrounded by her family support system. Linda had taken extended leave from her part-time job at the local library to serve as Sofia's primary caregiver, while Robert handled all the insurance paperwork and appointment scheduling. Marcus visited daily after work, bringing Sofia's favorite smoothies from a nearby health food store and updating her on office gossip from his tech company. Jessica, his girlfriend, surprised Sofia with homemade soup and offered to help with anything from grocery shopping to prescription pickups. Even Jake, despite their limited relationship history, proved unexpectedly supportive. After Sofia finally explained her situation, he began stopping by regularly with small gifts, books, herbal teas, soft socks, and never seemed uncomfortable with her changing appearance as the chemotherapy began affecting her hair and complexion. Dr. Harrison was pleased with Sofia's response to treatment. The enlarged lymph nodes were shrinking, and her blood work showed that the cancer was responding to the aggressive drug regimen. However, he also warned that the side effects would likely intensify with each cycle, as the cumulative toxicity built up in her system. "The third and fourth treatments are typically the most challenging," he explained during a follow-up appointment. "Your body is fighting both the cancer and the effects of the chemotherapy. It's important to have realistic expectations about what the next few months will look like." Sofia's world had contracted to the boundaries of her parents' house, punctuated by medical appointments and brief ventures out for fresh air when she felt strong enough. Her hair had begun falling out in clumps after the second treatment, leading to an emotional afternoon when Linda helped her shave off the remaining strands and shop for comfortable head coverings. The reflection in the mirror showed a young woman Sofia barely recognized, pale, bald, and thin, but surrounded by a family that seemed more devoted than ever. Sunday dinners had resumed in a modified format, with Linda preparing gentle foods that wouldn't upset Sofia's sensitive stomach, and the conversation focusing on Sofia's progress rather than the usual family updates. As November turned into December, Sofia felt cautiously optimistic about her prognosis and grateful for the unwavering support surrounding her. She was beginning to understand that beating cancer wasn't just about surviving the medical treatment. It was about accepting help, redefining strength, and learning to trust others with your most vulnerable moments. What Sofia didn't yet realize was that her family's support, which felt so solid and dependable, was about to be tested in ways that would reveal the true nature of their commitment to her recovery. By December, Sofia had settled into what Dr. Harrison called the new normal of cancer treatment. Her third chemotherapy cycle had been completed just before Thanksgiving, and despite the cumulative fatigue, she was beginning to recognize patterns in her body's response to the drugs. The first 2 days after treatment were always the worst, followed by a gradual improvement that peaked around day 10, giving her nearly a week of relative wellness before the next cycle began. During one of these good weeks, Sofia made a decision that surprised even herself. She wanted to return to work, at least part-time. The isolation of being homebound was beginning to affect her mental health, and she missed the creative challenges and social interaction that her job provided. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Linda asked over breakfast, concern evident in her voice as she watched Sofia eat her first full meal in days. "I need something normal in my life," Sofia explained, stirring honey into her tea. "Dr. Harrison said light activity might actually be beneficial, and Patricia has been incredibly understanding about keeping my position open." The conversation with her boss, Patricia Stevens, had been more positive than Sofia anticipated. Peterson and Associates had implemented a flexible work-from-home policy during the pandemic that remained in place, and Patricia was eager to accommodate Sofia's treatment schedule in whatever way worked best. "We've missed your creative input on the Williams campaign," Patricia admitted during their video call. "If you feel up to contributing even 10 hours a week, we'd love to have you back on the team." Sofia's first day back to remote work felt like a small victory. Sitting at the desk in her childhood bedroom, wearing a soft beanie to cover her bald head, she found herself energized by the familiar challenges of crafting marketing messages and designing digital graphics. Her concentration wasn't what it used to be. The chemo brain Dr. Harrison had warned about was real, but she could still produce quality work in shorter bursts. Marcus noticed the change in Sofia's demeanor immediately. During his evening visit that Tuesday, he found her excited to share details about a successful client presentation she'd given via video conference. "You sound like yourself again," he observed, settling into the armchair beside her bed. "It's good to see you engaged with something other than medical appointments." The success at work gave Sofia confidence to gradually expand her activities. She began taking short walks around the neighborhood on her good days, bundled in the warm coat her parents had bought her when her weight loss made her previous winter clothes too large. The familiar streets of the Hawthorne district, with their eclectic mix of coffee shops and vintage stores, provided a connection to her pre-cancer life that felt healing in its own way. Emma visited regularly, often bringing takeout from Sofia's favorite restaurants and updates about their shared friend group. These visits were complicated emotionally. Sofia was grateful for the connection, but also acutely aware of how much her life had diverged from those of her healthy peers. While Emma dealt with normal 26-year-old concerns like dating drama and career advancement, Sofia's world revolved around blood counts and anti-nausea medications. "I feel like I'm living in a parallel universe," Sofia confided to Emma one evening as they watched a movie together in the family room. "Like I can see my old life, but I can't touch it anymore." Emma's response surprised her with its insight. She said, "Maybe that's not entirely bad. I mean, obviously, cancer is terrible, but watching you these past few months, you're stronger than any of us realized. You're handling something that would completely break most people." The comment stuck with Sofia because it reflected a growing awareness she'd been reluctant to acknowledge. The treatment process, as brutal as it was, had revealed reserves of resilience she didn't know she possessed. Each time she thought she couldn't endure another round of chemotherapy, she found the strength to continue. Each time the side effects knocked her down, she managed to get back up. Dr. Harrison was pleased with Sofia's progress when she came in for her mid-treatment scans in early December. The PET scan showed significant shrinkage in all the affected lymph nodes, and her blood work indicated that the cancer was responding exceptionally well to the treatment regimen. "These are the kind of results we hope to see," he told Sofia and her parents during the follow-up appointment. "Your body is tolerating the chemotherapy well, and the cancer is clearly responding. I'm optimistic about your long-term prognosis."
The positive medical news coincided with Sofia's growing comfort with her changed appearance. The complete hair loss had been traumatic initially, but she'd gradually adapted to wearing colorful scarves and beanies that actually suited her face shape better than she'd expected. Linda had helped her learn makeup techniques to enhance her features without eyebrows or eyelashes, and Sofia was beginning to feel attractive again, albeit in a different way than before. Jake's continued presence in her life had been another unexpected source of strength. Their relationship had deepened through the crisis in ways that might have taken years under normal circumstances. He'd seen her at her absolute worst, vomiting, exhausted, and bald, and never wavered in his attention and care. "I know this sounds weird," he told her during one of their video calls when Sofia was too tired for an in-person visit, "but going through this with you has made me realize how shallow most of my previous relationships were. What we have feels real in a way I've never experienced."
Sofia found herself falling in love with Jake, not despite her cancer diagnosis, but in some ways because of how it had stripped away all pretense and revealed who they both truly were. Their dates now consisted of quiet evenings watching movies, gentle walks when Sofia felt up to it, and long conversations about dreams and fears that healthy people rarely shared so openly. The holiday season brought its own set of adjustments. Christmas had always been Linda's favorite time of year, with elaborate decorations and multi-course meals that brought the extended family together. This year, the celebrations were scaled down to accommodate Sofia's energy levels and dietary restrictions, but the love and warmth remained unchanged. Sofia's cousin Rachel drove up from San Francisco with her family, and her uncle David flew in from Denver. The modified Christmas gathering felt special in its intimacy. Fewer people, quieter conversations, and a deeper appreciation for simply being together. Sofia received gifts that reflected her new reality: soft pajamas, organic skincare products, books about healing, and a beautiful silk scarf from Jessica that made her feel elegant despite her circumstances. "You look beautiful," her 8-year-old nephew Tommy told her matter-of-factly as she opened presents on Christmas morning. "Different than before, but still beautiful." The innocence of his observation moved her to tears, happy tears for once. Children, she realized, saw past the external changes to the essential person underneath in ways that adults sometimes struggled to do. As the year drew to a close, Sofia felt cautiously optimistic about 2024. She was halfway through her treatment protocol, with 3 more cycles to complete by early spring. Her body had proven capable of handling the aggressive chemotherapy, and her cancer was responding better than expected. She'd maintained some connection to her professional life, deepened important relationships, and discovered inner strength she'd never known existed. The support system surrounding her felt solid and dependable. Her parents had reorganized their entire lives around her treatment schedule. Marcus visited daily without fail, and Jake had become a constant source of emotional support. Even her extended family and friends had rallied in ways that demonstrated the depth of their care. Sofia began making tentative plans for her post-treatment life. She wanted to take a real vacation when she was cleared to travel, maybe a trip to the Oregon coast with Jake, or a visit to see Emma's family in California. She was considering whether to request a promotion at Peterson & Associates, recognizing that surviving cancer had given her a new perspective on taking professional risks. Most importantly, she felt grateful in ways that her pre-cancer self couldn't have imagined. Grateful for modern medicine, for insurance coverage, for the OHSU medical team, and most of all, for a family that had proven their love through actions rather than just words. The 4th chemotherapy cycle was scheduled for the first week of January. Sofia approached it with a mixture of dread and determination. Dread for the side effects she knew were coming, but determination fueled by the knowledge that she was halfway through her treatment protocol. What Sofia couldn't have anticipated was that the new year would bring challenges that had nothing to do with cancer cells or chemotherapy drugs, and everything to do with the people she trusted most to help her heal.
The first week of January brought an unexpected complication that would test everything Sofia thought she knew about her family's commitment to her recovery. It started with what seemed like a minor scheduling conflict, but would escalate into something that shook the foundation of her support system. Marcus had been promoted to senior sales director at his tech company, a position that came with significantly more responsibility and a substantial salary increase. The promotion required him to travel frequently to client sites across the Pacific Northwest, sometimes for several days at a time. Initially, this seemed manageable. Marcus had been Sofia's most consistent daily visitor, but her parents were still her primary caregivers. The real complication emerged when Robert was offered a consulting opportunity with his former accounting firm. The project involved helping a major client restructure their financial operations,
work that would require Robert's expertise for at least 3 months. The timing couldn't have been worse. The project was scheduled to begin in late January, right when Sofia would be starting her 4th round of chemotherapy. It's a significant amount of money, Robert explained to the family during a tense dinner conversation. And honestly, with all the medical bills that insurance doesn't cover, we could really use the additional income. Sofia understood the financial pressure her treatment had created. Even with good insurance, the copays, deductibles, and ancillary costs were substantial. Her parents had already dipped into their retirement savings to cover expenses, and Sofia's reduced income from part-time work wasn't helping the situation. How much traveling would be involved? Linda asked, her voice carefully neutral. I'd need to be in Seattle 3 days a week, sometimes 4, Robert admitted. The client specifically requested me because of my experience with their industry, and the fee structure makes it difficult to turn down. The elephant in the room was obvious to everyone. If Robert took the consulting job, Linda would become Sofia's sole caregiver during a period when the chemotherapy side effects were intensifying. Linda had been managing well with Robert's help, but the prospect of handling everything alone, driving Sofia to appointments, managing her medications, providing round-the-clock care during her worst days, seemed overwhelming. Sofia found herself in an impossible position. She didn't want to be the reason her father turned down a lucrative opportunity, especially when her medical bills were creating financial strain. But she also couldn't imagine navigating the remaining months of treatment without his steady presence and practical support. Maybe I could stay with Marcus and Jessica during the weeks Dad is traveling, Sofia suggested, though the idea filled her with anxiety. Marcus's downtown condo was modern and beautiful, but it lacked the comfort and familiarity of her childhood home. That's not really practical, Marcus replied, his tone more distant than usual. Jessica and I both work full-time, and honestly, our place isn't set up for someone who needs the level of care you require. The comment stung more than Sofia expected. Level of care you require made her sound like an invalid rather than someone temporarily dealing with cancer treatment. She'd been feeling stronger lately, more independent, but Marcus's words reminded her how much her illness had disrupted everyone's lives. Jessica, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, finally spoke up. What about hiring a professional caregiver for the days when Robert is traveling? There are agencies that specialize in cancer patient care. It was a practical suggestion, but it highlighted how complicated Sofia's situation had become. The family was discussing her care as if she were a logistical problem to be solved, rather than a daughter and sister who needed their support. Linda seemed torn between her husband's career opportunity and her daughter's needs. I can manage on my own, she finally said, though her voice lacked conviction. It's only 3 months, and Sofia is doing so much better than she was in the beginning. Sofia recognized the sacrifice her mother was making and felt guilty about it. Linda had already put her own life on hold for months, and now she would bear even more responsibility while Robert pursued professional opportunities that would benefit the family financially. The decision was made to proceed with Robert's consulting arrangement, but the dynamic within the family had shifted in subtle but significant ways. Conversations that had once flowed naturally around Sofia's treatment schedule now involved complex negotiations about who would be available when and for what types of support. Marcus's travel schedule for his new position proved more demanding than initially expected. His visits became sporadic, sometimes several days between appearances, and when he did come by, he seemed distracted by work obligations. The easy camaraderie they'd shared during Sofia's early treatment had been replaced by a more formal concern that felt dutiful rather than heartfelt.
I'm sorry I can't be around more, he told Sofia during one of his brief visits. This promotion is really important for my career, and Jessica and I are trying to save up to buy a house. Sofia understood that life continued for everyone else, but she also felt increasingly isolated as her family's attention was divided among competing priorities. The cancer that had once united them in a common cause was now creating logistical challenges that seemed to strain their relationships. Linda was struggling more than she wanted to admit. Without Robert's help with practical tasks like grocery shopping, prescription pickups, and appointment scheduling, she found herself constantly behind on everything. Her stress was becoming evident in small ways: forgotten medications, double-booked appointments,
and a generally frazzled energy that made Sofia feel like a burden. "Mom, maybe we should look into that caregiver idea," Sofia suggested, after Linda had forgotten to pick up Sofia's anti-nausea prescription for the second time in a week. "We can't afford a professional caregiver on top of everything else," Linda replied sharply, then immediately softened her tone. "I'm sorry, honey. I'm just tired. I can handle this." But it was becoming clear that Linda couldn't handle everything alone. The fourth chemotherapy cycle hit Sofia harder than any previous treatment, leaving her bedridden for nearly a week with severe fatigue and digestive issues. Linda, exhausted from providing round-the-clock care without backup, seemed to be reaching her breaking point. Jake stepped up during this period, taking vacation days from his design job to help however he could. He brought meals, ran errands, and sat with Sofia during her worst moments so Linda could rest. His presence was a blessing, but it also highlighted how the family support system that had seemed so solid was beginning to fracture under pressure. "I feel like I'm drowning," Linda confided to Jake one evening when Sofia was finally sleeping peacefully. "I never realized how much Robert was helping with everything until he wasn't here." The most troubling development was Sofia's growing sense that her family was beginning to see her cancer treatment as an ongoing burden rather than a temporary crisis they were weathering together. Conversations that had once focused on her recovery timeline now dwelt on the practical challenges her care created for everyone else's schedules and plans. During Robert's weekend visits home from Seattle, the family dynamics felt strained and artificial. He would spend Saturday catching up on household tasks and Sunday reviewing Sofia's medical schedule with Linda, but the easy warmth of their previous interactions had been replaced by something that felt more like crisis management. "How are you feeling about the remaining treatments?" Robert asked Sofia during one of these weekend visits, but his tone suggested he was more interested in when her care requirements would end than in her actual emotional state. Sofia found herself lying, minimizing her ongoing symptoms and side effects to avoid adding to her family's stress. She was still several weeks away from her 5th chemotherapy cycle, with a 6th and final treatment after that, but the end felt simultaneously close and impossibly far away. The isolation was perhaps the most difficult aspect of this phase. While Sofia's medical condition was improving, Dr. Harrison remained pleased with her response to treatment. Her emotional state was declining as she felt increasingly disconnected from the people she'd counted on most. Emma's visits became more important than ever, providing the unconditional support that Sofia's family seemed less able to offer. During one particularly difficult conversation, Emma pointed out something Sofia had been reluctant to acknowledge. "Your family loves you," Emma said carefully, "but they're treating your cancer like a project that's taking too long to complete. They've organized their lives around a timeline that doesn't match the reality of what you're going through." The observation was painful because it was accurate. Sofia's family had approached her cancer diagnosis with the same problem-solving mentality they brought to other challenges. But cancer treatment couldn't be managed like a home renovation or career transition. It required sustained emotional presence and flexibility that seemed to be wearing thin as the months progressed. Sofia began her 5th chemotherapy cycle in early February with less family support than she'd had since her diagnosis. Linda drove her to the appointment and stayed for the infusion, but her distraction was evident as she fielded multiple phone calls about Robert's work schedule and Marcus's latest travel delays. As Sofia sat in the infusion chair, watching the familiar cocktail of drugs flow into her port, she realized that the most challenging part of her cancer journey might not be the medical treatment itself, but learning to navigate a support system that was proving less reliable than she'd believed possible. The crisis that would shatter Sofia's remaining faith in her family's support came on a cold Tuesday morning in late February, just 3 days before her 6th and final chemotherapy treatment. What should have been a week of celebration and anticipation for the end of her treatment protocol instead became the moment when Sofia discovered exactly how conditional her family's love had become. It started with a phone call that Linda took in the kitchen while Sofia was having breakfast. From her seat at the table, Sofia could hear her mother's voice rising with excitement as she spoke to someone about a cruise opportunity. A Mediterranean cruise in March, Linda was saying. Oh, that sounds wonderful. How long has this deal been available? Sofia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Portland weather. Her final chemotherapy treatment was scheduled for Friday, which meant she would be dealing with her worst side effects throughout the following week. The timing of any vacation plans seemed problematic, to say the least. When Linda hung up the phone, her expression was a mixture of excitement and guilt. That was my sister Karen, she explained, avoiding Sofia's eyes. She's found an incredible last-minute deal on a Mediterranean cruise for next month. 17 days, visiting 8 countries. It's something we've talked about doing for years. Next month? Sofia repeated slowly. As in, right after my treatment ends? Well, that's the thing, Linda said, sitting down across from Sofia with visible discomfort. The cruise departs March 15th. Your final treatment is this Friday, and Dr. Harrison said you should be feeling mostly back to normal within 3 to 4 weeks. Sofia stared at her mother, trying to process what she was hearing. Mom, you know the recovery from the last treatment could take longer than previous cycles. Dr. Harrison said the cumulative effects mean it might be 6 weeks or more before I'm fully functional again. But you've been doing so much better lately. You're working part-time, you're getting around on your own most days, and Jake has been so helpful with everything. The implication was clear. Linda was ready to transfer responsibility for Sofia's post-treatment care to her boyfriend of 6 months, a man who had no family obligation to provide ongoing support. This cruise opportunity won't come again, Linda's continued, her voice taking on a defensive tone. Karen already put down a deposit for 4 people, her and Bill, me and your father. We've been through so much stress these past months, and the doctors are optimistic about your recovery. It seems of perfect timing for all of us to get some rest and relaxation. Sofia felt as if the ground was shifting beneath her feet. All of us? You mean all of you? I'm not included in this rest and relaxation plan. Honey, you'll barely be finished with treatment. You won't want to travel yet. And honestly, your immune system will still be compromised. A cruise ship would be the worst possible environment for you right now. Sofia was right about the medical realities, but her reasoning felt like a convenient excuse rather than genuine concern for Sofia's well-being. What Sofia heard was, we've done our duty, we're tired of caretaking, and now we want to enjoy ourselves while you continue recovering alone. What about Marcus? Sofia asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Marcus and Jessica are actually thinking about joining us, Linda admitted. Jessica found flights that would let them meet the ship in Barcelona and cruise for the final 10 days. It would be a great opportunity for them to travel together before they start house hunting seriously. Sofia sat in stunned silence, absorbing the reality that her entire family was planning to abandon her immediately after her most difficult treatment, leaving her to manage the recovery period that would likely be the hardest yet. I can't believe you're discussing vacation plans while I'm still in active treatment, Sofia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. We're not abandoning you, Linda said quickly. Jake will be here, and Emma can check on you regularly. You're so much stronger now than you were in the beginning. And honestly, Sofia, we're all exhausted. We need some time to decompress from everything we've been through. The phrase, everything we've been through, struck Sofia as particularly revealing. Linda was talking about Sofia's cancer as if it had been equally traumatic for the caregivers and the patient, as if watching someone go through chemotherapy was comparable to actually experiencing it. When Robert returned from Seattle that weekend, the cruise plan had already been finalized. Sofia learned this not through a family discussion, but by overhearing him on the phone with the travel agent, confirming payment details and discussing travel insurance. Dad, Sofia confronted him after he finished the call. Mom told me about the cruise. Are you really planning to leave town right after my final treatment?
Robert's expression was uncomfortable but resolute. Sofia, your mother and I have been under tremendous stress for months. We've rearranged our entire lives around your treatment schedule, and we're both emotionally and physically exhausted. The doctors are confident about your recovery, and you have other people who can help you. Other people? You mean Jake, who I've been dating for 6 months? And Emma, who works full-time and has her own life?
Jake has been incredibly supportive, Robert replied. More supportive than we had any right to expect from someone who's only known you for such a short time. And you've been managing so much more independently lately. Sofia realized that her family had interpreted her growing independence during treatment as evidence that they were no longer needed, rather than recognizing it as a sign of her strength and resilience. Her ability to work part-time and handle some daily tasks had become justification for them to step back from their caregiving responsibilities. Marcus's reaction was perhaps the most painful of all. When Sofia called him directly to discuss the cruise plans, his response was defensive and dismissive. "Sofia, you're going to be fine," he said impatiently. "The treatment is almost over, you're responding well, and you have people who can help you if you need anything. Mom and Dad have sacrificed a lot for your care, and they deserve some time to recover too." "Recover from what?" Sofia asked. "From helping their daughter through cancer treatment?" "From the stress of watching their daughter go through cancer treatment," Marcus corrected. "Do you have any idea how hard this has been for them? For all of us. We've been living in crisis mode for months." Sofia was speechless. Her brother was actually suggesting that her family members were victims of her cancer diagnosis, deserving of sympathy and special consideration for the burden her illness had placed on their lives. "I never asked for cancer, Marcus," Sofia said quietly. "And we never asked to spend months managing your care." Then immediately seemed to realize how harsh his words sounded. "Look, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant that everyone needs some space to process everything that's happened." But Sofia had heard exactly what Marcus meant. Her cancer had been an inconvenience to her family, a disruption to their comfortable lives that they'd tolerated for as long as necessary, but were now eager to escape. The final chemotherapy session on Friday was the most isolated and depressing medical appointment Sofia had experienced since her diagnosis. Linda drove her to the appointment, but spent most of the 8-hour infusion period on her phone, finalizing cruise details and discussing packing lists with her sister Karen. Jake took the day off work to sit with Sofia during the treatment, holding her hand while the final round of toxic drugs flowed into her system. His presence was a comfort, but it also highlighted how completely her family had checked out of her cancer journey just as it was reaching its conclusion. "I can't believe they're leaving town next week," Jake said quietly, watching Linda argue with someone about shore excursion bookings. "The timing is unbelievable." Sofia was too emotionally numb to cry. The betrayal felt too large and overwhelming to process completely. Her family, the people who had raised her, who claimed to love her unconditionally, who promised to support her through this crisis, were planning to celebrate the end of her treatment by abandoning her for 17 days of luxury vacation. "Maybe it's better this way," Sofia told Jake, though she didn't believe her own words. "At least now I know who I can really count on." Dr. Harrison's final consultation after the chemotherapy infusion was positive from a medical standpoint. Sofia's latest scans showed no evidence of remaining cancer, and her blood work indicated that her body was ready to begin the recovery process from months of aggressive treatment. You should expect the recovery period to take 6 to 8 weeks. Your immune system will need time to rebuild, and the fatigue can be more significant after the final treatment due to cumulative effects. It's important to have good support during this transition period. Sofia nodded mechanically, knowing that the support Dr. Harrison was referring to would come from Jake and Emma rather than her own family. The people who shared her DNA and her history had decided that their role in her cancer journey was complete the moment the final drug finished dripping into her IV line. As they drove home from the hospital that evening, Linda seemed oblivious to Sofia's emotional state, chattering excitedly about the cruise itinerary and the clothes she planned to pack. Sofia stared out the passenger window at the familiar Portland neighborhoods, feeling more alone than she had since the day she was first diagnosed with cancer. The irony wasn't lost on her that her family's abandonment was happening just as she was technically cancer-free. She had survived the disease and the treatment, but she wasn't sure she would survive the betrayal of the people she had trusted most to help her heal. The breaking point came on the Tuesday morning after Sofia's family left for their Mediterranean cruise. She woke up feeling worse than she had after any previous treatment, the cumulative effects Dr. Harrison had warned about hitting her with devastating force. Her temperature was 101.2 degrees. Her white blood cell count had dropped dangerously low, and she was too weak to get out of bed without assistance. Jake had stayed over the night before, sensing that Sofia shouldn't be alone so soon after her final treatment. When he checked on her that morning and saw her flushed face and labored breathing, he immediately called Dr. Harrison's emergency line. "Her temperature is over 101. She's barely responsive, and she's having trouble breathing," Jake reported, his voice tight with worry. "Should I bring her to the emergency room?" "Yes, immediately," Dr. Harrison's nurse replied. "With her compromised immune system, any fever could indicate a serious infection. Don't wait. Bring her in now." As Jake helped Sofia get dressed, she found herself thinking about how her parents would react if they knew their daughter was heading to the emergency room while they were enjoying breakfast on the ship's deck somewhere in the Mediterranean. The thought was too painful to dwell on, so she focused instead on getting through the next few hours. The ER at OHSU was busy that morning, but Sofia's status as a recent chemotherapy patient got her immediate attention. Within an hour, she was admitted to the oncology ward with neutropenic sepsis, a life-threatening infection that her devastated immune system couldn't fight on its own. "We caught it early," Dr. Harrison explained when he arrived to check on Sofia that afternoon, "but you'll need to stay in the hospital for at least a week while we treat the infection with IV antibiotics and monitor your blood counts." Sofia lay in the hospital bed, connected to multiple IV lines and feeling sicker than she had at any point during her treatment, and realized that she was facing this crisis with only Jake and Emma for support. Her family was thousands of miles away, completely unreachable except for occasional Wi-Fi connections when their ship was in port. "Have you been able to reach your parents?" Dr. Harrison asked, clearly expecting that her family would want to be informed of her hospitalization. "They're on a cruise," Sofia said simply, too exhausted to explain the full situation. Dr. Harrison's expression revealed his confusion and concern. It was clearly beyond his understanding why parents would choose to travel internationally so soon after their daughter's final cancer treatment, especially during the vulnerable recovery period. Jake stepped up in ways that humbled Sofia completely. He took a full week off work, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside her bed and advocating fiercely with the nursing staff about her pain management and care. Emma visited daily after work, bringing Sofia's favorite magazines and providing updates about the outside world that helped combat the isolation of hospitalization. The most profound moment came on Sofia's 4th day in the hospital. She was finally feeling well enough to have coherent conversations, and Jake was reading aloud from a book when Sofia interrupted him. "Jake, why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. He looked up from the book, confused by the question. "Doing what?" "Taking care of me, missing work, sleeping in that horrible chair. We've only been dating for 6 months, and you're doing more for me than my own family." Jake was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. "Because I love you," he said finally. "Not because we've been together for some predetermined amount of time that makes it obligatory, but because love means showing up when someone needs you, regardless of how convenient or inconvenient it might be." His words crystallized something that Sofia had been struggling to understand about her family's behavior. They had treated their support during her cancer treatment as a debt that could be fully paid, a finite obligation that ended when her treatment protocol was complete. "My family thinks they've done enough," Sofia said, the realization hitting her with surprising clarity. "They kept a running tally of everything they sacrificed for my treatment, and when the ledger balanced in their favor, they felt entitled to stop." "That's not how love works," Jake replied gently. "Real love doesn't keep score." Emma's perspective, shared during one of her evening visits, provided another piece of the puzzle Sofia was trying to solve. "I've been thinking about your family a lot," Emma said, settling into the visitor's chair with a cup of coffee from the hospital cafeteria. And I think the problem is that they approached your cancer like a project, with a clear beginning, middle, and end. They organized themselves around getting you through treatment, but they never considered that recovery might require different kinds of support. Different how? Sophia asked. Well, during treatment, you needed practical help. Rides to appointments, medication management, someone to monitor your symptoms. But recovery requires emotional support and patience while you figure out who you are after cancer. That's much more complex and open-ended than driving someone to chemotherapy. Emma's insight helped Sophia understand why her family had become increasingly distant as her treatment progressed. They had signed up to help her get through a medical crisis, not to support her through the psychological and emotional work of rebuilding her life after cancer. The week in the hospital gave Sophia time to reflect on patterns in her family relationships that extended far beyond her cancer diagnosis. She began to see how their love had always been somewhat conditional, based on her role as the responsible, low-maintenance daughter who rarely asked for significant help. When Sophia had needed new furniture for her apartment, she had researched and purchased everything herself. When she was struggling with a difficult boss at work, she had handled the situation independently rather than seeking family advice. When her previous relationship ended badly, she had processed the heartbreak quietly, without burdening anyone with her emotional needs. Her cancer diagnosis had forced her into a position of unprecedented vulnerability and need, and her family had initially risen to the challenge. But as the months wore on and her needs didn't diminish according to their timeline, they had become resentful of the disruption to their comfortable family dynamic. "I think I've been the wrong kind of daughter," Sophia confided to Jake one evening as they watched the sunset through her hospital room window. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I've been so focused on being independent and not causing problems that I never learned how to ask for help or express my needs clearly. When the cancer forced me to be vulnerable, my family didn't know how to handle it because it was outside our normal pattern." "That doesn't excuse their behavior," Jake pointed out. "Lots of families figure out how to adapt when someone gets sick." "No, it doesn't excuse it," Sophia agreed, "but it helps me understand it, and more importantly, it helps me understand what I need to do differently going forward." The breakthrough Sophia experienced during her hospitalization wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation with her family. It was about recognizing her own worth and learning to build relationships based on mutual support rather than her role as the easy, undemanding family member. Dr. Harrison was amazed by Sophia's physical recovery once the infection cleared. Her blood counts rebounded quickly, and her energy levels began returning to something approaching normal. More significantly, the nursing staff commented on the change in her emotional state. She seemed stronger and more confident than when she was admitted. "You look different," Emma observed during Sophia's final day in the hospital. "Not just healthier, but, I don't know, more solid somehow?" Sophia knew exactly what Emma meant. For the first time since her diagnosis, she felt like she was standing on firm ground, not because her cancer was gone or because her family had returned to being supportive, but because she had discovered that she could survive being completely let down by the people she had trusted most. When Sophia was discharged from the hospital, Jake drove her not to her parents' house in Hawthorne, but to her old apartment with Emma. It was time to reclaim her independence, but this time from a position of strength rather than as a way to avoid burdening others. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Emma asked as they climbed the stairs to their shared apartment. "I'm sure," Sophia replied, and for the first time in months, she meant it. Sophia's family was still somewhere in the Mediterranean, posting photos of ancient ruins and exotic cuisine to social media, while completely unaware that their daughter had nearly died from complications they could have anticipated if they had bothered to stay informed about her recovery timeline. But Sophia was no longer waiting for them to come home and make things right. She was building a new life based on relationships with people who understood that love means showing up, especially when it's difficult or inconvenient. The breakthrough wasn't about Sofia forgiving her family or finding ways to repair their relationship. It was about Sofia finally understanding her own worth and refusing to accept conditional love disguised as family loyalty.
Sofia's family returned from their Mediterranean cruise on a sunny Thursday afternoon in early April, their social media feeds filled with photos of themselves looking relaxed and tanned against backdrops of ancient architecture and azure seas. They had been gone for 17 days. 17 days during which Sofia had nearly died, recovered in the hospital, moved back to her apartment, and fundamentally transformed her understanding of family, love, and her own worth. The first contact came from Linda, who called Sofia's phone at 2:30 p.m. from the Portland airport baggage claim. "Hi, honey, we just landed." Linda's voice was bright and cheerful, filled with the energy of someone who had just returned from the vacation of a lifetime. "How are you feeling? We have so many stories to tell you about the trip." Sofia, who was working on a freelance design project at her kitchen table, felt a strange detachment listening to her mother's enthusiastic chatter. "I'm doing well, Mom. How was the cruise?" "Oh, it was absolutely magical. The food, the excursions, the people we met, it was exactly what your father and I needed after these difficult months. We feel so refreshed and ready to get back to normal life." Ready to get back to normal life. As if Sofia's cancer had been a temporary inconvenience that was now safely in the past, allowing everyone to resume their regular routines without further disruption. "That's great, Mom. I'm glad you had a good time. We brought you some beautiful souvenirs from Rome and Barcelona. When can we see you? Maybe Sunday dinner this weekend? We can't wait to hear how you've been doing." Sofia, who was working on a freelance design project at her kitchen table, felt a strange detachment listening to her mother's enthusiastic chatter. "I'm doing well, Mom. How was the cruise?" "Oh, it was absolutely magical. The food, the excursions, the people we met, it was exactly what your father and I needed after these difficult months. We feel so refreshed and ready to get back to normal life." Ready to get back to normal life. As if Sofia's cancer had been a temporary inconvenience that was now safely in the past, allowing everyone to resume their regular routines without further disruption. "That's great, Mom. I'm glad you had a good time. We brought you some beautiful souvenirs from Rome and Barcelona. When can we see you? Maybe Sunday dinner this weekend? We can't wait to hear how you've been doing." Sofia realized that her mother had no idea that she had been hospitalized, no knowledge of the life-threatening infection, no awareness that her youngest daughter had faced a medical crisis while they were dining on Mediterranean delicacies and touring European capitals. "Actually, Mom, quite a bit happened while you were gone. I was hospitalized for a week with neutropenic sepsis. I just got out a few days ago." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Linda's voice returned, noticeably less enthusiastic. "Hospitalized? What do you mean? Why didn't you call us?" "How exactly would I have called you? You were on a cruise ship in the middle of the Mediterranean. And even if I could have reached you, what would you have done? Cut your vacation short to come home?" "Of course we would have come home," Linda protested, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced of her own words. "Sofia, you should have found a way to contact us. This is exactly the kind of emergency we would want to know about." Sofia felt a familiar anger rising, but it was different from the hurt and betrayal she had experienced before. This anger was clean and purposeful, backed by a new understanding of her own value and boundaries. "Mom, you left town 3 days after my final chemotherapy treatment, during the period when Dr. Harrison specifically warned that complications were most likely to occur. You chose to prioritize a vacation over being available if I needed help. I'm not going to apologize for having a medical emergency that inconvenienced your cruise schedule." Linda's response revealed everything Sofia needed to know about how little her family had changed during their time away. Sophia, that's not fair. We had already paid for the cruise, and the doctor said you were responding well to treatment. We couldn't have predicted that you would develop complications. Actually, they could have predicted it. Dr. Harrison told us that post-treatment infections were a significant risk, especially after the final cycle. You chose to ignore that information because it interfered with your vacation plans. The conversation ended awkwardly, with Linda promising to call back later after she had processed what Sophia had told her. Sophia hung up, knowing that her mother would spend the afternoon crafting a narrative that justified their absence and minimized their responsibility for abandoning their daughter during a vulnerable time. Robert's call came that evening, his approach more direct but equally defensive. Sophia, your mother told me about your hospitalization. I'm sorry you had to deal with that alone, but I want you to understand that we made our travel decision based on the medical information available at the time. Dad, the medical information was that I would be immunocompromised and vulnerable to serious infections for weeks after my final treatment. That information was very clear. The doctors also said you were responding excellently to treatment and that your prognosis was very good. We felt confident that you were out of immediate danger. Sophia realized that her father was approaching this conversation like a business negotiation, presenting facts that supported his position while ignoring evidence that contradicted it. It was the same analytical mindset that had served him well in his accounting career, but made him emotionally unavailable when his daughter needed support. Dad, this isn't about medical statistics or prognoses. It's about the fact that you prioritized a vacation over being available for your daughter during her recovery from cancer treatment. Sophia, that's an oversimplification. Your mother and I have been under tremendous stress for months. We needed some time to recover and recharge so we could be better support for you going forward. Going forward? When exactly do you think I'm going to need your support going forward? The question seemed to catch Robert off guard. In his mind, Sophia's cancer journey had ended with her final chemotherapy session, and any ongoing needs were minor inconveniences rather than legitimate requests for family support.
Marcus's reaction was the most predictable, and in some ways the most painful. When he finally called 3 days after their return, his tone was immediately defensive and accusatory. "Marcus, I heard you were hospitalized while we were gone," he said without preamble. "Mom is really upset that you didn't try harder to contact us." "Sophia, how exactly was I supposed to contact you from a hospital bed while you were on a cruise ship in international waters?" "There are ways to communicate from ships," Marcus insisted. "You could have had Jake or Emma send us an emergency message through the cruise line. The fact that you didn't even try suggests that you wanted us to feel guilty about taking the trip." Sophia was stunned by her brother's accusation. Even now, faced with evidence of how badly they had abandoned her, Marcus was making himself the victim of Sophia's supposedly manipulative behavior. "Marcus, I was fighting a life-threatening infection. Figuring out how to contact my family on their vacation was not my priority. Staying alive was my priority." "That's dramatic, Sophia. You're fine now, aren't you? Obviously, the situation wasn't as serious as you're making it sound." The conversation with Marcus crystallized something Sophia had been gradually understanding about her family dynamics. They would never accept responsibility for their behavior because doing so would require them to acknowledge that their love for her was conditional and self-serving. It was easier to rewrite history and blame Sophia for expecting too much than to face the reality of how they had failed her. The moment that would define Sophia's new relationship with her family came the following Sunday, when Linda called to invite her to resume their traditional family dinners. "We thought it would be good to get back to our regular routine," Linda explained. "Things have been so disrupted these past months, and now that your treatment is over, we can all move forward." "Mom, I won't be coming to Sunday dinners anymore," Sophia said clearly. "What do you mean? Why not?"
Because I've realized that our family relationships are based on me being easy and undemanding. When I needed real support, you weren't available. I'm not interested in pretending that didn't happen so we can all feel comfortable again. Sophia, you're being unfair, Linda protested. We've been incredibly supportive throughout your entire treatment. We rearranged our lives for months to take care of you. You were supportive as long as it fit your timeline and didn't interfere with your other priorities, Sophia corrected. When my recovery didn't end according to your schedule, you abandoned me for a vacation. That's not unconditional love. That's conditional help with an expiration date. The silence on Linda's end was telling. She could hear her mother struggling to find words that would restore their previous dynamic without acknowledging the validity of Sophia's perspective. I think you're still recovering emotionally from everything you've been through. Maybe when you've had more time to heal, you'll see things differently. Maybe, Sophia agreed, but I won't be returning to family dinners or pretending that nothing has changed between us. Sophia's recovery from cancer became the foundation for building a completely new life. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment in the Alberta Arts District, a vibrant neighborhood that reflected her growing confidence and independence. The space was entirely hers, decorated with her photography, filled with plants that thrived under her care, and free from the weight of family expectations. Her relationship with Jake deepened in ways that surprised them both. Having weathered the ultimate test of crisis together, they built a partnership based on mutual support and genuine care rather than convenience or obligation. When Jake proposed to Sophia on the 1-year anniversary of her final chemotherapy treatment, she said yes with complete confidence in their foundation. Professionally, Sophia's cancer experience had given her a new perspective on risk and opportunity. She left Peterson & Associates to start her own design consultancy, specializing in healthcare marketing. Her personal experience with the medical system provided insights that made her work particularly effective, and her business grew quickly through referrals from satisfied clients. Emma remained Sophia's closest friend and chosen family, their relationship strengthened by having navigated Sophia's crisis together. When Emma decided to move to Seattle for a new job opportunity, Sophia felt confident that their friendship could withstand the distance because it was built on genuine care rather than obligation or convenience. Sophia's relationship with her biological family settled into a pattern of distant cordiality. They exchanged cards on holidays and birthdays and occasionally shared updates about major life events, but the deep emotional connection had been severed irreparably. Sophia felt no anger about this outcome, only relief at no longer having to maintain relationships that had proven to be fundamentally unreliable. The most profound change in Sophia's life was her understanding of her own worth. Cancer had stripped away many things, her hair, her energy, her illusions about family loyalty, but it had also revealed strength and resilience she hadn't known she possessed. She learned to ask for help when she needed it, to set boundaries with people who couldn't meet her emotional needs, and to build relationships based on mutual support, rather than her ability to be low maintenance. 2 years after her final chemotherapy treatment, Sophia received a call from Dr. Harrison's office reminding her of her routine follow-up appointment. As she sat in the familiar oncology waiting room surrounded by current patients in various stages of treatment, Sophia reflected on how completely her life had transformed. She was cancer-free, physically healthy, and emotionally stronger than she had ever been. She had built a successful business, a loving relationship with Jake, and a chosen family of friends who understood that real love meant showing up consistently, especially during difficult times. The young woman who had received her lymphoma diagnosis 3 years earlier believed that family love was guaranteed and unconditional. The woman sitting in Dr. Harrison's waiting room knew better. She understood that love was a choice that had to be made repeatedly, especially when circumstances were challenging. Sophia's cancer journey had ended not with her family's reconciliation or apology, but with her own transformation into someone who knew her worth and refused to accept less than genuine care from the people in her life. The treatment had saved her life, but learning to value herself had taught her how to live it fully. When Dr. Harrison delivered the news that her latest scans showed no evidence of disease, Sophia smiled with quiet satisfaction. She had survived cancer, But more importantly, she had learned to thrive without the approval or support of people who loved her conditionally. Her family had taught her what conditional love looked like. Jake, Emma, and her chosen community had shown her what unconditional support felt like. The contrast had saved her life in ways that no chemotherapy could ever.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.